I'll try to do my best. Okay. So first of all, I want to thank the organizing committee for having for all the work they've put into this conference. Okay. And now I'm beginning. Well, my presentation is called Depersonalized Self-Mentioning as a Means to Achieve Credibility in Promotional Genres. To start with, credibility is essential for promotional genres and persuasion, and also a very powerful marketing concept, okay? Then in hotels, it is strongly attained through the hotel's self-mentioning, which provides trustworthiness about the services offered, okay? In other words, self-mentioning is the most typical way to address potential customers, because it projects closeness and assertiveness, all right? However, self-representation is also construed with depersonalized realizations, such as the hotel's proper name, nominalizations, such as the hotel, the restaurant, the rooms, etc., okay? Well, here I'm showing two examples, but unfortunately you can't see them. So I'm going on with my theoretical description. So this research is based on a study of 100 hotel websites, and I hypothesize that the use of depersonalized self-mentions diminish closeness, creating distance and thus authority. And my results suggest that promotional discourse, when construed with these depersonalized self-representations, may improve credibility and, as a result, also persuasion, okay? Now, we should go back to the variables that shape an effective social communication. And to start with, we must say that discourse is construed with variables that affect how it is perceived and interpreted, and text authors control these variables for an effective communication, shaping messages and conversations. In other words, to be communicatively successful, senders and writers must know what are the readership's expectations and adapt their discourse accordingly, okay? In this sense, Attar, in 2017, claims that for a good reader's reception, a text must take into account certain factors such as shared knowledge, okay? And finally, mutual understanding or intersubjectivity is necessary between the participants of a talk seen as a social phenomenon, okay? Now, going back to what authorial voice is in promotional genres, on the one hand, it is materialized through personal pronouns such as we or our, but also with depersonalized ones, as I mentioned before, okay? Now, these depersonalized choices are a disciplinary and generic convention of those promotional genres. They are related to how readers interpret the authorial voice. And this is really, really important because it is based on the notion of recipient design. In other words, what readers or customers expect as a convincing way to be addressed through a credible discourse. If we go down to personalized self-mentions, they establish a direct bond of closeness and familiarity with the readership, facilitating persuasion. These personal pronouns, such as we or our, are the most direct way to communicate with potential customers through generic and disciplinary functions like advising, recommending, offering, accommodating, or arranging. Whereas depersonalized ones, depersonalized self-mentions, such as the hotel's proper name, the hotel, the restaurant, the staff, the spa, or even pronouns such as it or they, establish a distance with the readership and thus an apparent mitigation of the authorial voice. This kind of mitigation derives from the fact that the authorial voice is objectivized, showing a very low degree of personal commitment. Also, depersonalized agentive self-mentions show an array of uses that gradate the distance and provide more or less authority, objectivity, specificity, and therefore professionalism. Okay, now I can't show you my quantitative analysis results, but I describe them to you. In this analysis, the occurrences for personalized authorial voice choices were 92%, whereas depersonalized ones only accounted to 7.79%. Okay, in other words, personalized self-mentions clearly outnumber those of depersonalized ones. Now, if we want to more specific quantitative analysis and results, we see that there are three depersonalizations that are the most important ones.
You have 5 minutes.
Goodness gracious. Okay, hotel names, hotel, and it, okay? Right, now I'm going, if I only have 5 minutes, I'm just going, to the final part, which is the conclusive one. Very importantly, topics, subjectivity, and objectivity create a sort of triangulation, which is very important for the analysis of hotel websites in this sense, okay? And the results, my results, suggest that, for example, petty matters such as pet accommodation, being served a glass of wine, and so on, are communicated through personalized uses where the author is visible, since these imply closeness and friendliness, whereas other topics such as payments, insurance, or events organization are transmitted through objective, invisible authors embodied through the hotel, the staff, etc. In other words, they address serious matters, okay? Now, okay, there are therefore two distinct realizations of the authorial voice in the sense I have just described, some of them creating closeness and friendliness, and others, very, very little, in this case, creating distance and invisibility. However, their combination appears to be what readers and potential customers expect as a way to persuade them and as a way to achieve credibility, which is basic for persuasion in these hotel websites as promotional genres, okay? Right, just only to finish with this, I would like to say that interpersonal communication and social interaction should be addressed from a discourse perspective, which is what I have done in this research. Discourse being the battlefield where interactive positioning is negotiating and established following disciplinary, generic, and language constraints. And this is a very innovative way to address interpersonal communication and relations within academic and, in this case, professional genres, okay? And well, this is all. I have tried to synthesize my presentation. I am very sorry for the technical problems. And if somebody is interested in my presentation, I would be glad to answer questions or even to get in touch with them through email or through other means, okay? I would also like to say that this is part of an article which has been published in the journal IGES, International Journal in English Studies, okay? And there they will be able to find my article in which this presentation has been based, okay? And well, this is it. Nothing else to say. Maybe well, I'm going back to the event here. Here I am. I don't know if somebody has some question. Very sorry about the technical problems, but this is it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francisca. Thank you for accomplishing time. You have done an excellent job. Maybe what you can do, since this is already published, if you could, through the chat, share your email so that people who are interested in reading the paper could email you. So maybe that would be a good idea if you do that through the chat. And also very sorry for the technical problem because we were here 20 minutes before and we have been trying and everything was working well. I don't know if there are any questions. I have checked the chat. I cannot see any questions.
Well, I have no access to the chat in this moment. I don't know why, again. I don't know why.
Well, I don't know. The best thing is that people have downloaded Cisco WebEx, okay, to avoid these problems. You know, that's the best thing to avoid this. If, of course, you can enter through the link provided by the Congress, but if you have Cisco WebEx, probably you can sort this because I don't know how to, you know, I can see the chat.
Maria, I think there is a question. There is a hand raised.
Where? I cannot see.
I think it's Yang Jialing. It's
okay. Yes. So
one of the attendants.
Yeah, because I was checking the other chat, so I couldn't see. So Yang, maybe if you could either write the question or if you want to connect your microphone and ask the question.
Yes, I can hear you. No problem. I can answer your questions. I'll be happy to do so.
So Yang, if you answer the question, you need to connect your microphone.
Yeah, I think he maybe raised his hand. But...
He has just written in the chat, so you can read.
Well, in any case, you can find, since my name is on the program, you can very easily find me on the internet in ResearchGate, and my address, my email is there in case you want to ask me any question about this. I'll be happy to answer, okay? Because now I have no access to the collective chat. I don't know why. I can only hear your voices, nothing else.
Thank you. The last thing I can see written in the chat is there is an option in Ver in which you can girar la pantalla. That's the last thing I can see in the chat. Do you see something different, Alicia? As the last, I can see the comments I got, the questions from my presentation. But I cannot see anything else. And I can still see Yang with the hand up, but the microphone is not connected. That's what I can see. I suppose you can see the same. I can see Esther nodding. Well, I just have a comment. It's not a question. I found fascinating the fact of paying attention to readership expectations, because that means that, you know, discourse has to be adapted. I suppose that the main expectations found in the studies are like people want to feel secure, people want to feel welcome, right? Especially in this new era we are living.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for your question. Yeah, this is exactly what people are expecting. I mean, at the same time, they want to feel secure, they want to feel safe about the services that are being offered to them, but at the same time they need to feel with some closeness with the hotel, with the companies themselves, okay? However, this was a pre-COVID study, so things might have changed dramatically, I'm afraid, and further research will be published in maybe this coming year about different ways in which people now are dealing with hospitality services, okay? But yes, it's true. People, there is also a new trend, which is trying to combine both kinds of authorial voice users. So in the same sentence, you can find the pronoun our and the hotel or the service itself in the same sentence. So it's a new trend, apparently, a discursive trend, which tries to put together both authorial voices, you see, in the same bunch of discourse. Yes.
Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you. Daniel Pascual wants to ask something. Yes, but you could ask through the chat. I cannot see your question. I can just see I want to ask something. So maybe since we are really running out of time, you can ask your question directly, and Francisca can answer quickly, and then maybe you can continue the discussion afterwards. So Daniel Pascual. You cannot open your microphone. I'm very sorry again. That's why we asked you to write through the chat the questions so that I can read them. Okay, well, maybe Daniel, you can contact Francisca directly, because now it's time for our next speaker. So let me remind you, please, if possible, write the questions through the chat that we did in the first presentation, and everything worked well. And then let me remind all the speakers that I will remind you when you have spoken for 10 minutes, okay? So now our next speaker is Esther Linares-Bernabéu, and the topic is also very interesting and really fascinated by the whole panel, and it's the use of trumping in female stand-up comedy, a cognitive pragmatic analysis. So thank you very much, Esther. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll try to be very brief. And if you are interested in this topic, I can just say that I will be publishing a paper by the end of this month in Studies in Psychology, the journal. So I'm Esther Linares. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute for Culture and Society at the University of Navarra, and I'm also a member of the Realia Research Group here in Alicante. The aim of this presentation is to show that trumping is a cognitive strategy that exploits the salience gap between the literal and the figurative meaning of an expression, which is used by female stand-up comedians to attack certain targets with different human markers such as polysemy, metonymy, or metaphors. So this is how I will structure my presentation. I'll start off by introducing the concept of trumping and the reason why it's important human discourse, so as to challenge certain sex roles, to reconceptualize the idea of gender, and also to reinforce bonds with the female audience. Then we will establish the theoretical framework and describe some of the key concepts and theories that support our research for the study of trumping in subversive stand-up comedy. Next, we will state methodologies that use to collect the corpus and the data scrutiny. And the key section will be dedicated to our quantitative and qualitative analysis, along with a discussion of the results obtained. And finally, I will conclude with a reflection on the current state of the topic is at and future lines of research. So let's start with
Can you hear properly? I have a problem with the microphone. Esther, we cannot hear you properly. Now, yes.
Well, I'm saying that different scholars have argued that subversive humor discourse not only elicits laughs, but also opportunities for the performer and the audience to connect and discuss important societal issues. Indeed, humor acts as a barometer of the cultural mood, as it shows what taboos hold sway and what subjects society feels dissatisfied or annoyed about. In fact, subversive humor is often means of empowerment for expressing frustration and dissent, and ultimately for challenging existing power relationships, according to effective means of challenging and one of the competencies used in this type of humor is trumping, which is a cognitive device used in adversarial humor that exploits the salience gap between the literal and the figurative meaning of an expression. So in the case of female stand-up comedy, we'll see how trumping acts as a rhetorical pragmatic strategy for the comedians to attack certain targets by using metapragmatic competence. The hypothesis was that humor is a socio-pragmatic tool employed by female stand-up comedians in their drive to reshape their gender identity on stage and surpass boundaries. Also, could be used to challenge certain sex roles, to reconceptualize the idea of gender, and to reinforce bonds with the female audience. So, if there is something this theory I agree with, is that humor we have a global cognitive linguistic approach for this study. The notion of space, discourse space, defended by Langaka, is one key notion in our study. Langaka distinguishes between ground and current discourse space, in which the figure is prominent, that is, the most salient semantic pragmatic items. Current discourse space is defined as the mental space, which encompasses the elements, relationships, and knowledge shared between the speaker and the listener, which maintains communication in a certain context during the discourse. The ground, in turn, is the specific act of speaking, in which the interaction between the speaker and the listener occurs at a certain time and place. So in this regard, we have observed that the comedians, as the linguistically creative people that they are, profile certain aspects of a structure more salient than others to achieve humorous misunderstanding, causing the observers, the audience, to focus on the profile, on the figure, while the essence of the joke goes unmarked in the basis of the structure. And this idea his colleagues, who suggest that laughter in humorous discourse is due to the fact that the speaker stresses certain aspects of the current discourse space structure in order to focus on these elements designated in the figure, and then the essence of the joke doesn't appear in the ground until the very end. So it's a cognitive device that takes the role of the speaker and musically is in the evaluation of the elements expressed previously by an initial speaker in order to counter criticism from that first speaker. So this subversion of the utterance in turn means a change in the discourse space, since the speaker changes the structured relationship of the figure on the ground, playing with the literal and figurative, prominent and non-prominent meanings, etc., or seeks other types of inferences, thereby creating an alternative meaning which lies hidden in the ground. So in this respect, Bill and his colleagues claim that the use that the second speaker does of trumping entails great cognitive effects and cognitive skills to infer and transform the verbal meaning of the initial utterance. That is, the second speaker shows advanced metapragmatic competence as far as she is capable of using her linguistic creativity to manifest disagreement. Accordingly, the speaker is her opponent, the first speaker initially in her attack. And in the words of Bill et al., 2006, one speaker may, linguistically speaking, snatch victory from the jaws of defeat by turning the tables of an opponent. The effect of this reversal is to elicit not just a sense of victory in the agent itself, but a form of admiration from any observer, while perhaps earning the grudging respect of the opponent. I did my study, that's what I was 2017 and 2018, and these stand-up performances were represented by 15 female comedians that were later their performance. Then each of these stand-up performances has been divided into humorous sequences, which are understood as a series of jab lines and punchlines which revolve around a specific topic, and that are maybe interrupted by laughter, applause, or even comments from the audience. So in this respect, I transcribed 504 sequences by following the Valesco transcription system, and this comes to a total of 805 minutes of recording and 97,749 words. These are the comedians I analyzed. I can introduce them to time constraints. Now going into the quantitative analysis, we see that jumping only appears in 67 sequences. That is only the 13.5% of the total. And I think that this 10% of this mechanism really to a strategy mainly made conversational expressive humor. We need two speakers. So the comedian must represent both characters to show the words from the initial speaker and her own, such as the second speaker. Likewise, we have seen that the dependence between the use of trumping, and the objects of ridicule. We could presume that because there is the use of trumping, there must be a target to address this criticism. But when I used the chi-square test with the statistical program R, I couldn't see any dependence. My null hypothesis was that both variables, trumping and targets, were independent, and the p-value was 0.7402. So this did not let us rule out our initial hypothesis, since we didn't have enough evidence to do so. And therefore, in principle, these variables are independent, and we would need a more extensive database to analyze the dependence of the use of trumping and the presence of a certain target.
Esther, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
We should also bear in mind that in order to trumping, there must be a certain parallelism between the response from the second speaker and the initial utterance from the first speaker. So, following the taxonomy proposed by Bill et al., we can find five types of trumping. Trumping based on homophony, which is basically founded on an homophonous parallelism between puns or wordplay. Syntactic trumping, in this, the second speaker uses morphosyntactic structure from the first utterance. Metonymic trumping, in which different metonymic inferences are used to understand association and implications between both interventions. Metaphoric trumping, which is a very common subtype also, in which the lexical relationships are exploited between the literal and the figurative meaning by means of figures of speech, such as metaphors, polysemy, or phraseological units. And referential trumping, that is, which in the second speaker allocates specific references to the generic expression from the first speaker to subvert its meaning and to elicit humor. Even so, this classification is not a definitive or exclusive, since we can find as many types as ways of constructing verbal meaning. Here we can see common types of trumping used in of course, we could have many phonic trumping, because this is quite common in the but not so much in Spanish, and neither referential trumping, because it requires contextualized information about these speakers and is not present in the stand-up comedy act. I try to simplify one of each of the most common ones. The metonymic trumping, in which comedians sequence. Scissors. Another thing which really pisses me off, you know, that indoor cycling is a static bike, and the guy wants us to imagine that we're in the mountains, doesn't he? So we are off to Talayuela, guys. Look, a bend, isn't it? We all look at each other thinking, oh, poor sod, don't we? It's really a strange sensation. The other day I said, look, I can't take it anymore of this bullshit. I'm off. And he says, where are you going? And I say, I've got a puncture. I'm a basket. We see that the stand-up comedian takes the advantage of the description of the indoor cycling class to use trumping against the monitor, who is placed as a speaker by means of the role play. To be specific, she narrates the indoor cycling class as if the monitor wanted to imagine them cycling through the mountains. So this is used by the comedian to create metonymic in the punchline of the joke, responding to the trainer that she has a puncture. In this respect, the fact that the discourse space, some elements are more prominent than others in the figure, for instance, the indoor cycling class, in which the cycling tour is simulated, enables the comedian to use her creativity in metapragmatic terms to distract the audience with humor, making them focus on different elements, while the conceptual essence of the joke remains hidden in the ground of the discourse space until the punchline, when she comments that she has a puncture. We can also find another in which we find the something totally with identity, and this way heighten Yes, I'm from Zaragoza, but I've been living in Madrid for a long time. When I first came to the city, the first thing they asked me was, but haven't you brought adoquines with you? And I say, I thought you already had asphalted roads. We see how Esther Jimeno is
You have 1 minute, Esther.
Use another meaning of the word adoquines and change the relationship between the figure and the ground of the discourse space, prominent and non-prominent. And in this way, the comedian subverts the meaning of the first utterance and counters those who make fun of the place where she comes from. However, the literal meaning of the word adoquin is not explicit in the response of the comedian, and the audience have to hear the meaning. It's essential for them to use their generic knowledge of the two meanings of the word in order to infer and appreciate also the humor in trumping. So I'm going to go to the conclusion because I don't have much time. I see that exaggerating and ridiculing them, and to also redefine the power relationships by offering an alternative interpretation. Comedians use their linguistic creativity to switch from one meaning to another and to achieve the best satisfy for these aggressive goals. And also, trumping acts as a rhetorical pragmatic strategy for the comedians to dissociate themselves from certain gender-based behavioral norms and to construct alternative identities and to question some heteronormative norms in a creative and humorous fashion. So, thank you very much. I'm sorry because
Thank you very much, Esther, for finishing right on time with this very, very interesting topic. You have to be very, very tired. Yeah, you have done very well. Thank you very much for your presentation. I am here in front of the chat, but I cannot see any questions. Let me check the participants just in case anybody has their hand up. If you have any questions, if there is anyone who cannot see the chat, you can also feel free to connect your microphones. In the meantime, I have been reading your abstract again, and I have checked, and you have also explained that in the presentation, that the most frequently used type of trumping are metonymic, syntactic, and metaphorical. And I was wondering if when you were doing the analysis, you were surprised by these results, or were they expected up to a certain extent, that out of the 5 trumping styles you have mentioned, these 3 were the most common ones?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised because, as I mentioned, I wasn't expecting much homophonic or referential because of what I already said. But what I was surprised about, and I couldn't explain here because of time constraints, was that some of the trumping cases that I found were combined. Maybe sometimes they were syntactic plus metaphorical, or metonymic plus syntactic. So that was the most interesting thing that I found.
Yeah, that's why I have asked you that question, because I could infer that some of them were combined and from the...
Exactly. In fact, the last example that I couldn't explain was just that.
I think that's very, very interesting, very symbolic. From a critical discourse perspective, that has a lot to say, to communicate, right? So I think that, first of all, we have to see, okay, if there are some that appear more often than others, that's important. And secondly, if some of them are combined, that really has to be deconstructed, studied, observed in great detail, because that really affects the way in which the meaning comes across, right?
Indeed, yeah, absolutely.
Any comments, any questions? I cannot see any questions in the chat. The participants, I cannot see anybody with their hand up. So if you want to use these 2 minutes, maybe to comment on that last example you mentioned, Esther, you are welcome to do that. If you want to spend any aspect that, you know, I
would just recommend everybody going to the paper that it will be published on the 27th of May. There they can find more examples and a more extensive explanation of all what I've mentioned today. It will appear in a special volume in the journal Studies of Psychology, edited by IROA.
Perfect. That will be very good. Yeah, because I think this is something that we really need to see the examples as contextualized as possible in order to understand the communicative functions that you have tried to explain, but the examples are really crucial, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's quite a complex strategy, but I would say it's the most interesting one, but also the most complex. And yeah, we need examples and we need to see a corpus to understand it better.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Welcome.
Do you plan to continue studying this topic, maybe using different...
I wish. Now in my university, I'm doing other things. I'm researching mediation and disposition strategies, which has nothing to do with HEMA. But yeah, I would like to continue with this topic, which is part of my PhD, of course.
Yes, because I think you have a huge potential here. And even if you also change, of course, the perspective, the theoretical background you have mentioned is fantastic, and it's obvious the data you have is, you know, is excellent. But maybe if you even have a chance or accept the challenge of changing the theoretical perspective, I think that the data is going to offer you a different
a broader
perspective. I think that the data you have is fascinating, really fascinating.
Thank you, Maria.
So thank you very much. I really enjoyed the presentation. And now the last presenter of this first part of the panel is Belén Zapata Barrero. And the topic of the presentation is Analyzing Sociolinguistic Behaviors, Identity Strategies in Political Context. So Belén, I can see that you have been given the role of presenter. So as you can see at the bottom of the screen, you have the possibility of sharing, compartir. And as you know, I will remind you when you just have 5 minutes. So the floor is yours, and thank you very much for being a presenter in this Congress.
Thank you very much, Maria. I think you can all see the presentation, right?
Yes, we can see it very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the organizing committee. I'm Belén Zapata Barrero, and I am a postdoc research student at the University of Murcia. And the presentation that I will be giving today is a really short summary of my thesis. Right, so from an overall perspective, my study aims to contribute to the understanding of the phenomenon of style shifting in political contexts from a multidimensional, socio-constructionist and speaker-oriented approach to the analysis of the social meaning of stylistic variation in social linguistics. More specifically, today I am going to address those identity strategies that might be used by politicians in public context. And to do that, I'm going to present the specific case of Hillary Clinton. Right, so my study is framed within third wave assumptions, which constitute the most up-to-date approaches to language variation and change in social linguistics. These approaches attempt to analyze and to discover how identity and ideological aspects might condition persona management strategies, social positioning, stance-taking movements, and other social or stylistic practices in which individuals might engage by actively employing different speech styles across different situations and contexts. This ultimately results in the creation of a distinctive style and in the construction and projection of a particular identity, which can be regarded as style-shifting strategies. This evidences the authenticity of the speaker, who operates as an authentic individual that actively engages in stylistic practices. Therefore, the individual's speech and stylistic repertoire will be determined by his or her strategic use of stance-taking moves, which evidences the ability of speech acts, which are acts of identity, to create and project social meanings. This is only possible thanks to the indexical mutability of linguistic variables, which means that those meanings of a linguistic feature will be gained and shaped by context of a style rather than something specific and predetermined that is associated with a given variable. Therefore, as you can see in this picture, the different meanings of a linguistic feature will operate as elements within an indexical field, and these meanings could be invoked under the influence of different factors in order to express a particular identity. Well, so this third wave approach, the third wave framework, contrasts with early approaches to style shifting phenomena. These early approaches did not address two crucial aspects. The first one, those strategies that might be employed by the speaker as an individual in order to position him or herself across different contexts. And the second one, those identity and or ideological factors that may condition such stylistic practices. In this respect, previous speaker-oriented analysis about style-shifting moves made by politicians have been crucial to design my study. Specifically, the one carried out by Hernández Campoy and Cotillas Espinosa. These authors analyzed the sociolinguistic behavior of a former political leader from Murcia and diagnosed her sociolinguistic behavior as a case of speaker design, since it was highly influenced and conditioned by identity and ideological aspects. Right, so as I have already introduced, my study focuses on variationist aspects and more specifically on how Hillary Clinton designs her speech style across different contexts by using indexicalized linguistic features. Therefore, my objectives are to account for identity creation processes made by Hillary Clinton when operating in political contexts, to observe the individual sociolinguistic behavior of the informant in micro-context from a multidimensional perspective of intra-speaker variation and under the principles established by the speaker design model in order to uncover social motivations in style-shifting phenomena, and therefore to identify acts of identity and stylistic moves so as to extrapolate them to a macro level, to observe how linguistic variables are used in meaning-making practices and identity projection processes in political speech events, and to investigate if the sociolinguistic behavior of Hillary Clinton is influenced by certain extralinguistic factors. Right, so in order to analyze the sociolinguistic behavior of Hillary Clinton in terms of intra-speaker variation as a strategic resource for political identity construction processes, 6 phonological variables were used as dependent variables, since dependent variables are the most accurate indicators of linguistic variation. As you can see in this table, 2 vocalic features and 4 consonantal features were selected, and 2 variants were coded for each phonological variable. Variant 1 always encompasses mainstream and prestigious forms, and variant 2 always encompasses non-mainstream and often stigmatized realizations. In addition, 4 political contexts were selected as independent variables in order to observe the speech style of the informant and to account for potential style-shifting strategies across different contexts. And these were a political statement, a political interview, a rally in a northern region of the US, and another rally, but this time in a southern region of the US. Further methodological implication must be taken into account. The first one is that mass media sources were used as an instrument for the observation of the speech style of Hillary Clinton. All the speech events have a video format, and since all those phonological variables were clearly delimited, no specific softwares were used for the present analysis. Instead, impressionistic coding techniques were used. In addition, the selected samples have an average duration of 12 to 19 minutes, and a total number of 1,889 tokens were yielded from the speech analysis of this informant. Lastly, both qualitative and quantitative methods were used to measure inter-speaker variation. As for the latter, inferential statistics were employed, specifically chi-square and logistic regression. These tests were used to test the existence of significant correlations between the variables studied and to predict sociolinguistic patterns in the speech of Hillary Clinton. Right, so regarding the results and analysis section, due to timing issues and among the different correlations carried out, I am going to present today the most statistical relevant ones. Right, so if we take into account the overall scores obtained by Hillary Clinton for the 6 variables studied, as you can see in this table, we will see that the total column indicates that this informant tends to predominantly use mainstream forms, the blue column, over non-mainstream realizations, in the orange column. However, certain variability might be observed in the usage that this informant makes of certain variables, as it is the case of price variable. So let's have a look at how Hillary Clinton uses price variable across the different contexts studied. Right, as you can see in these different figure, Hillary Clinton exhibits a similar sociolinguistic behavior when using price variable in the context of statement, interview, and Raleigh North. In these 3 contexts, she predominantly uses the non-mainstream variant of price variable, which was coded as diphthong I.
Belén, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. While the non-mainstream variant, which is the monophthong R, is scarcely used. However, when performing in the context of Raleigh South, we can see a noticeable increase in Clinton's usage of the monophthongal form and a subsequent decrease in her usage of the mainstream variant. This sociolinguistic behavior might be influenced by 2 aspects. The first one, geographical aspects. The high frequency with which Southern individuals employ variant 2, which tends to be associated with a strong Southern identity and cultural aspects. Second one, again, the high frequency with which African American speakers use the non-mainstream variant. And I think it is important to remark that African Americans represent a large percentage of the Southern population. Well, this pattern can also be observed if we pay attention to the results that Hillary Clinton obtained for all the variables, all the phonological variables studied across the different contexts. Again, we can see that she employs a similar sociolinguistic behavior in the context of a statement, interview, and Raleigh North. But when it comes to her performance in the context of Raleigh South, again, we can appreciate an increase in the usage of non-mainstream realizations and a subsequent decrease in the usage of mainstream forms. In general, we can see that this informant tends to adhere to mainstream conventions, although certain aspects like geographical or ethnic identity factors might foster the emergence of certain non-mainstream forms associated with a Southern culture and an African American speech. Right, if we apply a logistic regression to these results, certain predictions can be made. As you can see in the intercept column, the context of Raleigh North is going to be the context that will favor the most the appearance of mainstream forms in Clinton's speech, followed by the context of a statement. On the other hand, the negative values obtained for the column of intercept indicate that the context of interview and Raleigh North will be disfavoring effects in Clinton's usage of mainstream realizations, being the context of Raleigh South the one in which non-mainstream forms will be more prone to emerge. Right, so as we have seen, just as any other speaker, Hillary Clinton displays ideological traits when engaging in communicative interactions. For this reason, her choice of one variant over the other of a phonological variable will act as a vehicle in the expression and transmissions of her ideological stance on certain aspects. Therefore, her adherence to mainstream or non-mainstream conventions must be regarded not only as a mere verbal practice, but as an ideological and dynamic presentation of her identity, which evidences the multifaceted nature of linguistic variables when it comes to indexing meanings. Lastly, as a conclusion, and from a multidimensional and third-wave perspective of inter-speaker variation, and following the principles established by the speaker design model, we have seen that Hillary Clinton engages in identity creation processes when operating in political context. These creation processes might take the form of persona presentation and stance-taking strategies. We have also seen that she employs specific communicative strategies when designing her public speech style, as she adjusts her sociolinguistic behavior under the influence of certain exolinguistic factors, in this case, geographical and ethnic identity aspects. Again, this is only possible thanks to the indexical mutability of phonological variables that become crucial in meaning-making practices. Lastly, given that a style is a multidimensional phenomenon and that identities and ideologies are enacted in social interaction, the study of identity and ideological foundations of style shifting is crucial in order to properly account how speakers strategically design their speech style in order to position themselves in communicative situations. That's all. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for this interesting study, and thank you for your perfect timing. Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's very good. That's really good. Yeah, so that things work very well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just as I said, I was rushing.
Well, we all do, because there are very broad studies. We try to offer the data to follow the main steps in a presentation like this one, but still, you know, I think you have done very well. The data is very clear. The graphs you have used are self-explanatory, right? So thank you very much. I'm here checking the chat, but I don't see any questions. And I'm also checking the participants just in case there is anyone with their hand up. So if there are any questions or comments, please feel free to do that now. In the meantime, what I wonder, because I think that when we finish the presentation, we always have to see in which direction is research going. Maybe I was wondering, what about the results of a contrastic study in which you observe different women's style in political context, if they will be very different or very similar? For example, now the Vice President of the United States, I was wondering if you analyze and contrast the style with Hillary Clinton, it would be similar or different. And then, since you have mentioned, which I found very interesting, the fact that when Hillary was talking to African American communities, okay, so I was just thinking too, what about, I know there are not many, but what about analyzing the discourse of African women who are in political positions of power? And I wonder if the results would be similar, different. That's something that came to my mind while I was listening to you.
Thank you. Well, in my thesis, I compare the speech style of several politicians from the US and several politicians from the UK. And for those politicians of the US, I studied Trump, Barack Obama, Sarah Palin, which is not very well known, and Hillary Clinton. And for the UK, I analyzed the speech style of Boris Johnson, Jeremy Corbyn, Emily Wilberg, which again is not well known, and Theresa May. And as you were saying, the speech style of Hillary Clinton slightly differs from that of other female politicians, as in the case of Hillary Clinton. Theresa May, for example.
That's very interesting. And I was also thinking, maybe there we can explore the reasons for that. And I was wondering to what extent the social background of the politicians, because maybe there are some politicians that now are in top positions in society, but maybe some of them have different backgrounds, middle class, even lower, So I was wondering as to what extent that sociological background affects the way in which we communicate, right? And
Sure.
I think that's very interesting.
Sure. I slightly addressed that aspect in my thesis. As for Hillary Clinton, she studied in Massachusetts. She has had a kind of high socioeconomic background. So that is something that I would like to study more in depth, because I think that that would be a very determining factor when it comes to using speech style. Yeah.
Sure. And another factor, age, right? It would be interesting to see when, at what age is a woman in a top political position, and up to what extent maybe there are some women there that are in their 40s and some women in their 60s, at to what extent that has an effect on the discourse. I think that's another interesting sociolinguistic variable that can shed light on your studies.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will take that into account. I think that is very interesting. Thank you.
I think that's very good. I continue checking the chat, but nobody asked or comments. That's why I have been giving you some ideas or suggestions. There is still 1 minute. I think that the presentation is very, very interesting with a huge potential. And of course, as you said at the beginning, is just one part of your doctoral dissertation. So you have a very broad overview and you have all in your background, but we could only concentrate on this women, and I think you chose an excellent example actually to illustrate it. So if there are no more questions or comments, I would like to thank all the presenters for the excellent presentations. I have really enjoyed the session, and now, as you know, we have 10-minute break in this session and in the others, and at 1 o'clock we continue in all the sections, just in case you want to come back to discourse analysis or you want to go to other sections. So thank you very much for the quality of your work, for your time, for having decided to present your excellent work in this Congress, and thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria.
So, Alicia, I'm not going to leave the session. I'm going to stay.
Okay, me too.
Okay, and just in case something happens, I'd rather stay. I don't know if el botón de compartir activado.
Vale, yo creo que estaba ya activado, pero...
Ah, pues entonces es que ya te habrán asignado el rol.
Vale.
Sí,
porque habré entrado como...
Perfecto,
como
sí, ya estás,
¿no?
asignada, ya estás asignada. Perfecto, entonces debería funcionar sin problemas.
Vale, pues ahora comparto. Está todo correcto. Vale. Pues voy a darle a compartir. Compartir. Bueno, pero compartir pantalla o comparto PowerPoint. Solo. Que me da muchas opciones.
Pues tienes que elegir de entre todos los documentos que te salen el que quieres compartir. Yo, por ejemplo, tenía el programa de entretextos abierto, la web, tal, pues he elegido solo mi presentación de PowerPoint.
Perfecto, vale. Me da tantísimas opciones. Vale, ¿ahora sí lo veis?
Sí, perfectamente.
Vale.
Pues ya déjalo, no te salgas.
Vale.
Porque quedan 2 minutos y a todo el mundo le ha funcionado bien, pero a una persona no sé por qué, entonces mejor que no te salgas.
Vale, perfecto. Yo lo que estaba mirando, digo, a ver ahora dónde me veo, aquí a la derecha me veo yo, sí. me oís bien también y todo.
Sí,
Esta
perfecto.
mañana el audio también había presentado un poquito de problemas, pero bueno, si ahora me oís bien.
Pues un minuto y empezamos.
Sí, no te preocupes. 15 minutitos, ¿verdad?
Sí, te avisaré cuando lleves 10 hablando, te digo que llevas 5 y luego si no hubieras acabado justo cuando ya toca, pues te diré que te queda 1. Okay. So good morning. Thank you for being in this session again, for those who were here before, and thank you for those who have joined us. We are going to finish the morning with the last presentations on discourse analysis, and our next presenter is Begoña Vellés Fortuño. And the title of the presentation is The Importance of Doctor-Patient Communication in Medical Training. So Begoña, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this very nice introduction. Okay, good morning, everyone. Today, as Maria has already said to you, I'm going to talk about the importance of doctor-patient communication in medical training. First of all, I'd like to say that part of what I'm going to be telling you today is the research that we are conducting within the umbrella of two main research projects. One is creation of multilingual resources for improving doctor-patient communication in public health, and this is funded by the Ministry of Economy and Competitivity. And the second project that we are now running in the research group is development of online multilingual resources for improving the informed consent as a multimodal communication act. In both of these projects, we have some general objectives that are really affecting the part of the research that I'm going to be talking here today. Our general objectives are to raise awareness about the importance of communication, and especially in the doctor-patient relationship. Informing for us is not the same as communicating. Another of our main objectives is the development of tools to improve the communicative competence of future health professionals. This is the creation of audiovisual or other teaching materials. And the third main general objective is to introduce communicative skills in the curricular design for the teaching and training of health professionals. This includes, for example, just modifying some of the competencies that are attributed to some subjects for future medical professionals and future, for example, nursing staff. We all know that the communication setting, in the communication setting, there are many different elements and participants. If we just move towards the communication in healthcare settings, we find that obviously we find the speakers, the listeners, the topic, and everything is just very much influenced by the social context. In the healthcare setting, in the communication event, the speaker is usually the medical professional or clinicians in general. The listener is mainly the patient. We have to say that patients come from very different profiles. Sometimes the listener in this communicative act, the listener is the relatives that are accompanying the patient. And we may find some interpreters or any other medical staff that might be there in order to give some support. Which is the topic in the healthcare communication setting? Well, usually the main topic is talking about the disease, giving a diagnosis, giving a prognosis, talking about discomfort, okay, that depends on the degree of severity of the illness, and that depends on the medical specialty. And what kind of social contexts are really just influencing this clinical communication setting? Well, again, the patient is in the center of this communication. Into account, I just said we have patients from many different profiles and many different backgrounds. We have to take into account the country where the patient is coming from, the language, the culture, the religion, and other socio-cultural aspects. In the projects that we are running, we're paying quite a lot of emphasis on empathic communication. We aim at improving doctor-patient communication, and we really believe that empathy is an aspect that is key in every kind of communication event, and especially in the healthcare setting. But we depart from these following questions. How does a clinician become empathic? Or is emotion present in the medical consultation? Okay, we strongly believe that empathy can be taught in some way. And we also strongly believe that emotion is, or the degree of emotion in the medical consultation is really high. We have just revised some communicative competencies in healthcare contexts that have been fully developed and studied in other countries. For example, in the UK, medical practitioners are taught, and they're just guided to read the Calgary-Cambridge Guide. Okay, and in the US, for example, the American Medical Association has many different action plans in order to improve communication in the healthcare setting. As far as we know, some research has been done here in Spain, but we do not have such things such as these action plans or such a document as the Calgary-Cambridge Guide here in the Spanish clinical setting. I'm going to move now to what I'm going to be presenting today. What I'm going to present here is the pilot survey that we have generated out of these two main research projects that I have just mentioned, where we generated a survey. The initial survey included 24 questions plus 6 more questions. These 6 more questions that we added are different from the 24 questions and are presented in a separate survey, because these 6 questions are focused on socio-demographic aspects, such as which is your age, which is your mother tongue, where do you live, and so on and so forth. So these are data that help us just including the participants of the survey. The 24 questions that are per se the survey that we have just distributed to medical students are divided in 2 main parts, or they include questions related to individual awareness and related to educational background and professional training. We just delivered the survey to medical students within Spain, and more concretely students that answer most relevant questions, or some of the questions that show relevant results from the survey. I'm going to start by questions relating to part 1 that refer to individual awareness. Let me just mention one of the questions in this part. One of the questions says, do patients generally understand the information provided in the medical practitioner, by the medical practitioner or the doctor in the consultation? As you see, medical students, most of them believe that patients nearly always or sometimes, okay, which is the most commonly answered question, understand the information. There are only a few students that said that patients never or rarely understand the information provided. So medical students really believe that nearly always or sometimes patients understand generally or totally or completely the information provided by the medical practitioner. This really helps us to know which is their perception, okay, about the medical consultation, or about which is the communication in between doctor and patient.
Begonia, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. The second question related to individual awareness says, do patients generally understand and remember the relevant information regarding their medical treatment and follow-up? And here, we were really surprised that even the results says, or students, medical students believe that nearly always, or sometimes, patients understand and remember all the relevant information regarding the medical treatment. And we know that this is not so recurrent, because if you ask patients, for example, you may find that this is just the opposite, okay? One of the last questions I want to mention regarding to individual awareness has to do with empathic communication, as I said to you before. We asked the future medical practitioners, what do you understand by empathic communication? And we gave them several possibilities. Leave the patient talk, explaining the diagnosis and treatment comprehensively, listening to the patient attentively. These are all the options that we gave. According to the answers, being empathic for most medical students and future medical professionals is being close, okay? And secondly, they really believe or understand that empathic communication has to do with listening to the patient attentively, and followed by explaining the diagnosis or respecting the patient, okay? Now I'll very briefly comment questions related to the second part, which is education and future training, okay? We ask questions such as order the 7 basic medical areas of competence from more to less important. Here I have to say that for them, one of the most basic medical areas of competence is professional values, attitude, behaviors, and ethics. We were really surprised that they really valued behaviors and attitudes and ethical issues, and we were just very pleased about this result. Second most valued competence for future medical practitioners is communication skills. So they really believe that communication is important in their future profession. In the last positions with the same amount of people answering, that was clinical skills and critical analysis and research. So we were really pleased to know that communication skills had a very good position and a very relevant position. The second question relating to education and future training has to do with, do you think doctors should complement their explanation with any of the following resources? It was very useful for us in order to generate, as I said to you, resources for future medical professionals to include that in the training at universities. Most of them, or nearly half of them, really believe that explanation should be complemented by explanatory drawings. That's different from just pictures. Explanatory drawings is drawings with some text included. Then that's followed by only pictures and photos. They also mentioned web pages and brochures. And we still have a 4.1% of the students that said that it's enough with explanation and nothing else should be added to complement the doctor's explanations.
Begoña, you have 1 minute.
Okay, I'm going to just finish very quickly. We really believe, as I said to you before, that empathy and emotion can aid the clinical communication. We state that the absence, and we agree with Beckman et al., that the absence of empathy and emotion in practitioners' patient caring can be a predisposing factor of malpractices and patient dissatisfaction. And we want to insist that there is such a social belief of dehumanization of medical care that should be just avoided, and that by training and improving communication skills, we can aid students, medical students, and future medical professionals in improvement. The thing is, in multicultural and multilingual health setting encounters, are physicians, medical professionals, health professionals prepared linguistically and socially? In our research group, we are trying to palliate or minimize this preparation, this low preparation, this low linguistic and socially and social preparation for future medical practitioners. Because what we want is to avoid misunderstandings. We don't want anything to happen. We don't want anything happen, such as the picture showed here. I've been really quick. I had a couple of slides more to show, but as we are running out of time, if you want to know more about what we are doing in the projects and the results we are just getting to, I'll be very pleased to answer your questions here, or just you send me an email and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much, Maria, and thanks for just keeping me updated with the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Begoña, for this interesting presentation framed into fantastic and really necessary social projects that are really necessary, because I agree with your last slides that one of the last slides is social belief of dehumanization of medical care. Yeah, when we are there at hospitals taking care of somebody, sometimes, well, at least I have felt that I was not giving the information in the right way. And I suppose that's a general belief that you have proof, and that you really need to overcome with the project. So thank you so much. And checking the chat here, I don't see any questions. And also checking the participants, just in case somebody wants to have his hand up and ask questions to Begoña on this interesting presentation. In the meantime, I have really liked when you said that empathy can be taught, and of course it can be taught, right? It's an emotional competence, and I wonder if you can, or if you have already done some any approach to teaching empathy to these medical students you have asked the questions to, or have you done anything in that area yet with any workshops, special training or so?
We are now developing audiovisual materials. We've generated role plays. Okay, that's obviously they are not real role plays. They've been just prepared, and we are generating this audiovisual material to be included with many different situations. Doctor-patient communication, and we are trying to introduce that in some of the subjects in the medical curriculum. Okay, I have to say that when we started all these projects, we just surveyed and we just checked which was the training that future medical practitioners were receiving at universities here in the Valencian community, and we observed that medical students get some behavioral skills in one subject that they have in the 4th or in the 5th year, okay? But everything is done from the behavioral point of view, but nothing from the linguistic point of view. So this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to just develop this kind of materials to be included and just to give support to the behavioral part of okay, that is teaching from psychology departments, but not from communication or language departments. Okay.
Thank you, Begoña. And we have a question in the chat by Daniel Pascual. I think it is very interesting that they understand empathic communication as closeness with the patient and active listening. What reasons do you think may lie in the fact that comprehensive diagnosis is not relevant in their perceptions? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we got quite a lot of surprising answers, okay? This is something that caught our attention. We were happy because they really, we got some answers that were really interesting from our point of view, to see that they really care of, students really care about communication, or they know that communication is important. But on the other hand, yes, we just got answers that said that we're not, where they were not so interested in some of more technical medical issues. We attributed these to some of the age of the medical students that answered the questionnaire, because most of them were students from first year, in the first year medical degree, okay? First, second, and third year. We had just very few people answering from 4th or 5th years, which probably may have really changed the concept, because they already have dealt with some more technical medical concepts, and they have been just introduced in the medical context more than first year medical students. This is our evaluation.
Thank you very much, Begoña. Thank you, Daniel, for that question. I think it's very interesting. So yes, we look forward to reading the publications on the projects. I'm sure that you are working on publications and also that audiovisual material that you are preparing. I think that would be very valuable if that can be shared at a national or international level. I think that would be very useful. I truly believe that role play is a very good dramatic technique to teach emotional competencies. Of course, you have the language there, so I think it's going to be very effective. So thank you very much. We are running out of time, and there are no more questions to answer. So thank you, Begoña.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning. Go ahead. See you.
Thank you. And the next speaker is Ekaterina Teneva.
Good afternoon. Hello. Do you hear me?
Hello. We can see your presentation, and the title is Emotionalization Strategy as a Means of Representing Political Power in the American Internet News Discourse. So, Ekaterina, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. As you know, I will inform you when you have spoken for 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. So, good morning and good afternoon. Maybe it's afternoon in Spain. So, let me introduce myself. I'm Ekaterina Teneva, and I'm an associate professor at St. Petersburg State University. And the topic of my presentation is Emotionalization Strategy as a Means of Representing Political Power. So today I would like to talk with you about 3 points. The first point is what image of political power is created by the means of emotionalization strategy, what rhetorical devices and language means are involved in the strategy, and what role does emotionalization play in the modern internet news discourse. But firstly, I would like to outline the relevance of this topic. The first reason why this topic is relevant, it's about technology. So the active digitalization of media coverage and massive online news consumption has led to the opportunities of both visual and textual expression of feelings on a mass scale, and resulted in the rise of the so-called post-truth discourse, which is characterized by appeals to emotions. And this discourse uses the language which has no reference to facts, truths, or realities, and is used mainly as a strategic tool for manipulating public opinion. The second reason why journalists turn to and tend to appeal to emotions is economic. So being a commercial project, every newspaper struggles for readers' attention, and emotions are considered to be a tried and tested way how to grab readers' attention very quickly. And that's why even mainstream media are harnessing the emotional content that can quickly engage more audience so that the content becomes viral. So the next reason is about politics. Currently, almost every political episode is accompanied by emotional experiences in the media, and campaigns of disinformation using emotional manipulation are a common practice of the modern political processes, both in Europe and especially in the USA. And that's why, as you see from the graph, there is a decline of political trust in the American government. And lastly, modern online media are characterized by the dominance of a large number of fake news and conspiracy theories, and that's why nowadays many Americans no longer trust even the mainstream media, and rational arguments do not define news value, whereas the appeals to emotions have become widespread, especially when it comes to hard news, which have a big impact on our society. So for these reasons, I guess it's vital to study emotions and the phenomenon of emotionalization of online media, the discursive means of emotional appeals, and their role in public opinion manipulation in order to detect the ways of manipulating our thoughts and feelings and combat disinformation in the media. And as for the empirical basis, I decided to take news articles from the online versions of the highly circulated and reputable American papers. I considered the case of the United States 2020 presidential elections as the most striking example of both the loss of trust to the government and to the media, and the active use of emotionalization strategy. So my research hypothesis suggests that emotionalization is used as a rhetorical strategy both for enhancing and discrediting the image of political power and public opinion manipulation in the modern American internet news discourse, which has become a playground for post-truth politics. But firstly, let's define the notion of emotions. So emotions have been studied from multiple theoretical frameworks. From the point of view of physiological theory, emotions have been described as a set of physiological reactions. Neurological theory suggests that brain activity causes emotional response, and the supporters of cognitive theory claim that thoughts form emotions. However, no one will dispute that emotions are a tool of communication and persuasion, and as the father of rhetorics Aristotle said, the persuasion of a public audience largely depends on the emotional state the audience happens to be in. So by imposing certain emotions on the audience, the speaker influences the audience and makes it take a point of view that is advantageous for the speaker. And from this perspective, in order to convince mass audience, the speaker has to use emotional manipulation rather than logical argumentation. And currently, appeals to emotions have become the most effective and quickest way how to give a news story more prominence and gain the audience's attention. And I assume that emotionalization strategy deals with the deliberate use of emotive language and rhetorical devices which are used by the journalists with the aim of public opinion manipulation. Emotionalization has been addressed by many researchers, and here I'd like to draw your attention to the work of Maya Stanford, who distinguished the following representations of emotions in the media. Observed emotions, which are obtained by observations, interpreted emotions, which are obtained by logical inferences, constructed emotions, which are constructed by journalists, and experienced emotions, which we get from personal experience. So this classification serves as a basis for my analysis. And now let's have a look at the most common discursive means of representing these types of emotions and how they create the image of power in the political discourse of online media. So when it comes to representing power in online media, it is very common to use emotional colored vocabulary in order to create the image of political power and incline the readers to accept the opinion of the journalist. And here articles on politics contain the description of experienced emotions, so the feelings of people who are directly involved in the political processes. And in these cases, emotionally colored vocabulary is used either in direct speech or indirect speech, as you see from the examples. So here journalists use a lot of emotional quotations. However, the main reason why they include these quotations into the articles on politics is to evoke either positive or negative feelings about politicians, infect the reader with these emotions, and this way either enhance or discredit the image of those in power. So as for constructed, interpreted, and observed emotions, they reveal the journalist's subjective point of view, and here the markers of these emotions are mainly verbs of actions and lexems that describe physiological reactions and mental states of both political actors and journalists. Very often, journalists, alongside with emotionally colored vocabulary, use inclusive pronouns such as we, everybody, nobody, everyone, and these pronouns include the readers and the journalists. They stimulate positive perception of information and kind of blur the author and reader divide and make the statement sound less categorical. And in this case, journalists actively use lexems denoting unity, like we all, we together, we as a nation, which make the readers believe they personally share the emotions described by journalists. Another way to strengthen the emotionality of the arguments is to use discourse markers and intensifiers, which are used to emphasize the negative attitude, mainly the negative attitude of the journalist towards political power. And here they use adverbs like very, extremely, deeply, and so on. So in general, emotionally colored vocabulary is used either to discredit political opponents or to describe the actions of politicians in order to evoke a sense of emotional involvement in the audience, or to describe the feelings of the voters. And the last reason is to describe the emotional state of the journalist. And here, journalists act not only as journalists who objectively transmit information in the media, but as individuals who have their own feelings and political leanings. So emotionalization is also implemented through a number of syntactic ways of expressing emotions. For instance, fronting and inversions are very common and used to increase the dramatic effect and raise the emotionality of the arguments, putting the accent on the journalist's attitude towards the politician. Exclamatory and imperative sentences are also used to express journalist's opinion and create either positive or negative image of the politician. And parallelism and gradation is also typical when we speak about emotionalization. In the example, for instance, in the following example, the journalist imposes the negative image of Trump through the use of parallel structures and stylistic technique of gradation, evoking a sense of compassion and this way manipulating the audience. So metaphors and idiomatic language are also used to enhance the pragmatic effect and emotionally impact the audience, making it accept the journalist's point of view. And the last one is rhetorical devices. So journalists often use rhetorical devices to evoke emotional responses on the audience. And here, the use of statistics is one of the most common ways to enhance the emotional effect of the information presented, and also to show the journalist's point of view, his support or disapproval of a particular politician.
Katerina, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here journalists use large numbers, fractions, collective nouns, and they are used not as a factual information, but as a hidden appraisal of the politician and the journalist's attitude towards them. Rhetorical and emphatic questions encourage the reader to on how journalists feel about political issues, and this way they identify their feelings, their beliefs and opinions with the reader's opinion. And the last one, which is very common device, is appeal to authorities. The appeal to authorities is considered to be the strongest argument that is taken for granted without any evidence. And in these cases, journalists use the opinions of celebrities as arguments. When mentioning famous people, there happens the so-called halo effect, when a positive or negative opinion about a more famous person is projected onto a less known person, so that the reader has no choice but to accept this opinion without any evidence. If, for instance, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama thinks that Trump is clearly in over his head. So, and I've come across with implicit authorities. When we come across with implicit authorities, the journalists refer to popular opinion in order to hide their own opinion. And in these cases, they use collective nouns like people, Americans, we as a nation, or passive structures. For instance, most Europeans are thought to rejoice, or even impersonal sentences to identify their position with the position of the audience. So having analyzed the material, I've come to the following conclusion. So emotions have become a key factor that determines the credibility of information in online media. And emotions can be seen as an argumentation tool, as an engine, which influences the agenda of the news stories. And emotionalization is used as a tool both for creating positive and negative image of political power, promoting better understanding of the content, engaging the audience in a quick way, evoking emotional responses from the audience, discrediting or enhancing the image of power, and influencing political decision making. And another conclusion which can be made is that the appeal to emotions in online media is more efficient if the news audience has a kind of relevant background knowledge or positive stereotypes about the discussed person or issue, because people trust what they know. And so the degree of persuasiveness of the journalist emotional arguments, the interpretation of political decision, and most importantly, the effectiveness of the emotional impact on the audience depends largely on the emotional experience or stereotypes that the audience have. So stereotypes play a crucial role in influencing the audience and the way they take further actions. And the last conclusion is about journalism, which is turning more emotional, and reporting on emotions questions the credibility of media sources and challenges the journalistic ideals of objectivity and factuality. So being consumers of news, we often need to raise the red flag and detect the ways of manipulating our thoughts and beliefs and combat disinformation and propaganda. Thank you very much for listening. Grande gracias.